Welcome back to another episode, guys. Today we're going to talk about bait casters. I just went to Bass Pro and purchased a brand new one just so that we can set it up today on this video. It's still got the tags on it. I haven't pulled anything off. We'll set this up in a minute, but before we get to that, I'm going to talk to you about how I picked this rod out, why I chose this rod, and what maybe you should do when you're picking out yours. Now, I will say that this is strictly for beginners. If you're looking for advanced material, you should probably go on one of the Bassmaster YouTube channels and check out the pros. That's not what this one is about. What I have here are two very similar rod and reel setups. This was one that I bought a couple of summers ago. It's heavily used, really dirty. I need to clean it. This is the Lew's Custom Speed Spool, and this is the combo that they sell. I would always recommend to purchase the combo. If you're an advanced level guy and you've got the money to blow, then by all means don't buy the combo. You can buy a much better rod if you've got the money for it, because you usually, when you buy these combos, the lower end product of the combination is almost always the rod. All right, so Lew's makes really good I would say bait casting reels. I just purchased one of their spinning reels and it was garbage, but their bait casters are really good. It's a really good product. Now, when you buy the combo, you're going to get a semi-decent rod. You're not going to get a top-of-the-line rod. It's just the way that it goes. But when you buy the combo, you normally get the rod for like half price, so you get a really good deal. Because if you took the cost of what this reel would be if you purchased it by itself, the rod is only like maybe an extra 50 bucks added to that, and you've got the rod and reel combo, when this rod would normally sell for maybe $100 or something. Those are made up numbers, but it's something the equivalent of that. This rod is a 7-foot medium heavy action fast, so it's got a fast tip. This rod and reel setup is almost the same rod setup. It's a medium heavy, it's a fast tip, and it's 7.2. So this one's 7.2, that one's 7 foot, so pretty much the same. Now, the reason why I go with the 7 foot range on these is because it's the most versatile. So I can throw crankbaits on here, I can throw spinner baits on here, I can throw topwater on here, I can throw Texas rig worms on here, and I can throw fairly light lures in general. Any lighter than a certain level and you need to switch over to a spinning rod. I would say if you are in the market to purchase your first bait casting rod setup, the best tips I can give you is to spend the most amount of money that you have without crippling yourself on the reel. Now, I would never say go and put yourself in financial straits for one of these things. It's just fishing. You can catch fish on a cane pole. But you want to get, with bait casters in particular, you want to get the best reel that you have the money to purchase. And the reason why that is because they're so sensitive, and there's so much that can go wrong in the field while you're actually out there using it. And if you can't make it perform correctly, you're going to have a very frustrating day on the water. These things are bad to backlash if you don't know what you're doing. And the cheaper you go on the reel, really where you hurt is the braking systems. This braking system on this rod has 3 different components plus your thumb. The braking system on this one, as I'm looking at it, only has 2. I opened it up a while ago. It only has 2. I'll get into that in a minute. But generally speaking, the cheaper you go on the reel, the cheaper the company goes on the internal components. You've got less bearings, lower quality bearings, which means you're not going to have the smoothness right here. Usually your retrieve is going to be a little bit slower. Your braking system is going to be a little bit more on the cheap end, and you really need a good braking system for a beginner, because your braking system is just what's going to prevent you from having those really nasty backlashes while you're learning to use this reel. if you're going to buy a combo, you're going to need to look for a combo that's about $150 plus. The $200 mark is a really good range for a bait casting combo. Do they have some cheaper? Absolutely. Can you catch fish on those combos? Absolutely. But if you want a pleasant experience with less problems on the water, you're really going to need to step it up. Do not go, I would not recommend going cheap on a bait caster. It's just not worth the frustration. All right, guys, I've got 3 of my bait casters out here just to kind of show you the braking systems on them. Okay, guys, on this first reel, this is the Lew's Custom XP Speed Spool. You've got basically I would say a 4-component braking system. You got the spool tensioner, which is nothing more than, here's your spool, there's a rod that runs through here, and then this just puts tension on the rod. That prevents it from spinning quite so fast. You've got your magnetic brake right here, and then you pull this lever down and pop this off, and this is going to show your cylinder brakes. All right, so there's your magnetic brakes inside of there. That's your magnetic brakes on the inside of your cap. We'll get to that in a minute. All right, guys, once you pull that cap off, when you're on the inside of most bait casting reels, you're going to see the cylinder brakes, which are in here. They're always in an even number. They're either 4 or 6. That's the only combos I've seen. I'm sure they probably have something else. Matter of fact, this one over here has something completely different. It doesn't even have this. Generally speaking, if you're a beginner, you want 2 of these brakes on, 2 of these brakes off. And all it is a matter of pushing them in or pulling them out. All right. So you can see on this one, I have got 2 brakes on, 2 brakes out. And all it is pushing and pulling those pins until they're locking into place. I go 50% on my cylinder brakes. That's a great starting point. I've never had to adjust it from that. That works great on all of my reels. So that's what I would do for that one. Okay. And we're going to put this back on. And we're going to adjust the magnetic brake, which is here. So it's saying max is this way, and to free it up is this way. All right, so what I would do on this is set it right in the middle, and then you could fine tune it based on the bait that you have if you want to make an adjustment. But if you don't need to make an adjustment, leaving it halfway is always a good thing. So this is bottomed out one way. This would be the other max, so I'm just going to put it right out here. So I'm going to leave it right there at the halfway mark. Okay, guys, this is my new Lew's Mach Pro. This is the same speed spool design in the Mach Pro. As best I can tell, you cannot buy the rod separate from the reel separate from the rod. This looks to be only sold as a combo. I tried to find it separately online just to get a price difference and could not find it. The reason why I purchased this one was primarily because it had the Lew's speed spool style reel, which is pretty much the same thing. It's not calling it a speed spool, it's calling it a Mach Pro, but it's ultimately the same reel. It's got a handful of differences in here with the bearings. It's got a lot of the stainless steel on it, and there's one primary difference over here under the cap. So here's your magnetic brake. This one's got a minimum and a maximum 1 to 10. I'm going to turn it on 5 is where I would leave it. Somewhere in the 5 range is fine. Okay, and then when you open this up, this is where it gets interesting. See that? There are no cylinder brakes in there whatsoever. The spool is just in there, right? That's it. There's nothing on it. And your tensioner hits this, by the way, if you're wondering. So this one only has the magnetic braking system. There are no cylinder brakes in this model, which I'm kind of curious to see how this is going to perform. I kind of like that. Anyways, this is the Mach Pro. It only has the spool tensioner and the magnetic brakes, and of course the drag system. I'm going to put some line on this, and we're going to see how well this does. All right, now this is the Shimano Curado. This is my swim bait rod. This is one of those high-end models, but I'll just show you. This one has the 4-cylinder brakes here, and you just pop these up or down if you want them on or off. Right, so it looks like all of these are on. So I'm probably going to pop 2 of them off and leave 2 of them on and 2 of them off. Right, and you can see there are no magnetic brakes on this at all. See, that's where the magnetic brakes would be. There's not any there. All right, guys, I'm about to set this rod up, this new Mach Pro. I'm going to start by cutting the tags off. Alright, so this is my starting point. I'm going to spool it with this P-Line 15-pound 100% fluorocarbon. A buddy of mine gave me this ginormous spool, and I've been using it now for a summer and a half and haven't even come close to the bottom. I can actually start seeing different colors down in there now, so I'm probably getting close. But I'm going to spool it with this, and then we'll try it out. Alright guys, when you're spooling this up, don't forget to go through your line guide. And then what I do on these lues, they have holes in the spool, and I make the line go through the hole and then spin it around the reel and then pull it out. Alright guys, so I tied my line through my line guide onto my spool. I'm going to cut my tag line pretty short. Alright, now I'm going to show you the fastest way to spool a bait caster when you're doing this by yourself, and that's just to take your spool of line and hurl it in the water, and then start reeling, and you'll see it'll just start spinning off. And you'll notice the inside of my reel, you see kind of that black wall on the side. That's really what I'm watching when I'm thinking about how far I want to run my line up. I want to run it almost to the top, but I don't want to make it to where there's not some of that showing. You can overfill these things. That's about where I'm going to stop, right there. Alright guys, so I've filled the spool. I've set my magnetic brakes to halfway, which is about on the 5, close enough. What I haven't done is adjusted my spool tensioner, so I'm going to push the button. Woo, and that bait is plummeting to the water. That is not good. So I'm going to tighten this down a little. Still too fast. Tighten it down a little. Still too fast. Tighten it down a little. I'm going to crank down. It's got a little bit too much momentum, and I'm watching that bait. Alright, so that's too tight. I got too much speed, I can tell. That's it. So guys, this is the 3/4 ounce rattle trap. I'm going to reel it up close to my tip. I'm going to hit my button, but I'm going to let you see the spool while the bait hits the water. See, that's what you want when you set your brakes. You want your spool to stop, and you don't want your line to keep going, right? So that's about a perfect set for this weight of bait. That's going to change based on the weight of the bait that you're using. It's kind of critical to remember that. So I've got my magnetic brake set. I got my spool tensioner set. There's no cylinder brakes on this one, so I am good to go. I'm going to step out here and make a couple of casts and see how well this thing performs. I haven't set my drag. My drag is almost all the way out. Alright, so that's a semi-snug drag, but not tight as I could. Alright, so I got, whoa man, I got a big fish out of that. First cast on the new rod and I got a bass. That's nuts. I think that says something good, right? It's not a very big one, but the first cast on the new rod, that's pretty epic. Just a little dink. Alright, so I'm going to try to get it to where you can see if the line starts spooling when I cast. And I'm not going to do any thumb action except to cast it. And then when it stops, I definitely want to put my thumb on it. But while it was going, it did not do anything crazy. Right? And that's ultimately what you're looking for. You want to be able to cast this thing without the line spooling as it goes, but sometimes it'll spool out and it'll correct itself before it gets there. And when I fish with heavier baits, sometimes that happens. But I'm going to do that one more time. So I'm going to put my thumb on the line. Once it hits the water, I'm going to stop it with my thumb. And this reel is super smooth and fast. So I did a little bit different then. I didn't stop it with my thumb. I didn't seem to need to. When you get your brake set just right, it tends to work a lot better. All right. So if you go to cast and you notice that line starts spooling up on the reel right when the bait leaves the rod, you need to make some fine-tune adjustments to your magnetic brake or your cylinder brakes and tighten them up. All right? If you're casting and towards the tail end of your cast, meaning when your bait's getting to its final destination out there, it's unspooling then that's your spool tensioner is not tight enough. You follow that? The way this reel works is if you push the button and you just cast it, this thing's going to backlash all kinds of crazy. Your spool on the inside is just going to keep spinning long after your bait stopped, and all your line's going to come unraveled. So what you're having to do is you're having to put your thumb here, and you're going to stop this and speed and slow this down with your thumb. Your thumb is ultimately your fourth braking system. All right, so you're going to cast with your thumb here, and you're going to, the same way you would with like a Zebco 33, you're going to push the button and you're going to release the button to let the line out. On this type of reel, you're using your thumb to control that spool. So you're going to put tension on it, you're going to cast, you're going to lift your thumb up, but just barely. And so that you can control that spool from spinning while your bait's out there. And so I'm just going to tell you on the front end, this takes muscle memory and this takes time to do. So do not think you're going to get it out of the box and you're going to be perfect. It doesn't work that way. It takes a lot of practice and it's just muscle memory. So what you need to do is get out on a pond or on a lake and just sit here and cast and try to stop your bait at a specific point, right? So what I would do, if I was to have this rod and I wanted to practice this to get better with it, I'm going to sit out here and I'm going to throw at that weed line right there where there's some of that aquatic vegetation in the water, but I'm going to throw past it, but I'm going to stop it with my thumb by putting pressure on the spool. So I'm going to hurl it out there and then I'm going to stop it with my thumb, right? You need to get into the habit of doing that, right? When you're first starting, throw further than you want on purpose so that you'll master that putting your thumb on the spool and stopping the line. Oh, I think I got another bass. I did. Oh, good, he spit it. But that's ultimately what you got to do to get that muscle memory, is just throw and stop. And what you're trying to accomplish is, one, you want to be able to do that right there, but more importantly, where you end up backlashing is by a couple of different means. Either one, you've thrown directly into the wind and the force at which you casted was not replicated in distance because you're throwing into the wind. So your spool's spinning faster than your bait has the ability to fly. And so you'll backlash that way. But more commonly, what you'll end up doing is you'll throw and you meant to hit way over there, but it stopped right there. And so what happens is this thing's spinning fast enough for your bait to go that far, but your bait didn't go that far, so all your line starts coming out. Well, that's not a big deal as long as you had your thumb on this, you saw the impact coming, and then you put your thumb on it to stop it from going forward. That's what you're ultimately trying to do, is to stop the reel from spinning. All right, so that's the second problem. The next problem is when you've got your, here, let me turn my camera. If you're swinging your bait like this and you hit something on the backswing, like if you're in a boat and you hit another rod, or you hit the steering wheel on your steering column, or you hit your boat seat, or you hit a tree because you're standing on the bank, when you hit that and when you go forward, this thing gets all kinds of crazy. So you need to recognize it. So if I'm back swinging like this and I hit something, I immediately smash my thumb down on that reel and stop that spool from spinning. That's your goal, is to stop the spool from spinning. So if you'll just sit out here and practice stopping your line, stopping your bait at a grass line, that's the fastest way to build that muscle memory. All right, guys, that's going to wrap up today's video. Again, I am not a professional. This is just one man's opinion of how he sets up his bait casters. If you guys have comments or questions, please put them down below. If you've got tips for somebody that's a new fisherman that's just getting into using a bait caster, throw some tips down there in the comments section. They're reading this stuff. They could use our help to get them set up and get them going. This is how I set mine up. I'm sure some of you guys set yours up a lot different than me, so put it down there. I'm kind of curious to how you set yours up. I don't think that my way is the best way. It's just the way that I chose to do it. So don't feel like you're stapled into whatever it is that you choose. You can change it on the fly and start using something different later. So anyways, I'm fixing to get in out of these gnats. They're getting kind of crazy. You guys have a good one, and I'll catch you back here next week.